what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, June 19th, 2017, getting on through the month here, getting down close to Independence Day, which will be first part of next month here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's a lot of horrible things going on in the world right now. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. A couple of quick notes here. First of all, happy post-Father's Day to people like Bill Clinton. And a little bit of a celebration here in Hawaii yesterday. The Hokulea, which is a recreated Polynesian voyaging canoe, finished its 3-year voyage around the world. And they did it. Took 3 years, go around the world, no modern navigational equipment whatsoever, not even a compass. Just all by the ocean currents and the stars. And so there was a big celebration when it came into Magic Island yesterday as well. And Claire and I got to go on out when it came back from Rapa Nui on one of its earlier voyages. And it's a very interesting idea to consider that 1,000 years before Columbus sailed across the pond, the Polynesians were carrying on regular commerce all across the Pacific Ocean. So, anyway, getting into the news here, obviously some major developments over there in Syria. And apparently it all began when a U.S. F-A-18 Super Hornet shot down a Syrian Army Sukhoi 22 near the village of Rasifa. Now, the U.S. is claiming that this plane was bombing the U.S.-supported rebels, and therefore they had a right to shoot it down, and said that hostile actions of Syrian pro-regime forces will not be tolerated, which is really tough talk when you realize the United States does not have the permission of Syria's government to be in there. They haven't officially declared war. Syria doesn't want them there. The Syrian people don't want them there. But this is that attitude of America's exceptionalism, and we've got a right to go wherever we feel like going to. So they're out there with that tough talk. Now, here's where it gets really kind of nasty, because according to Damascus, according to Russian forces in the area, and even the Kurds are saying this plane was actually attacking ISIS when it was shot down by the U.S. forces. It was not targeting the U.S.-backed rebels. And that obviously is a big, big stink over there. And the Russian defense is saying the flight safety memorandum with the U.S. is suspended immediately. Apparently the United States did not use that little hotline to say, we are going to be shooting down this plane over this territory. So it was a breach of the deconfliction zone agreement, which, by the way, nobody agreed to the deconfliction zones. They just agreed to work to not shoot down each other's aircraft, and the U.S. has violated that. So Russia is out there saying that anything flying over Syria west of the Euphrates River, which is the territory where Russia is operating, will be regarded as a target. Now, they stopped short of saying they will shoot it down. But they are saying they're going to track it. They're going to keep an eye on what the U.S. Aircraft are doing, aircraft drones, whatever. They're going to be tracking it with their SAM radars, ready to pull the trigger if the U.S. does something like this again. The Pentagon is out there talking tough, saying that U.S. pilots will defend themselves from the Russian threat. The Russians, see, Russia's threatening us. Excuse me, who shot down whose airplane? But it looks like maybe the U.S. has blinked, because we just got this story. It came out of Newsmax, where the U.S. is now repositioning their aircraft further away from that Euphrates River. And so it looks like they're not in a hurry to see this thing escalate, but we are dangerously close to full-on outright combat between U.S. and Russian forces. And I certainly don't think that's a place we should go, and I'm sure probably most of you are going to agree with me. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I said this before. Something's got to be done. This can't keep going on. There's not going to be no Syrian army left if this keeps going on. You know, I mean, this is ridiculous. Everybody knows who's helping ISIS by now. If you don't, then you're living under a rock. You know, this is ridiculous.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that the the U.S. shot down a plane that was bombing ISIS only reinforces that image that ISIS is actually working for the United States. And we know from all those declassified documents from the last few months of the Obama administration, the U.S. contributed to the rise of ISIS. They've armed them, they've trained them, and they're continuing to do the same. Apparently, the United States has delivered a 7th shipment of heavy weapons and armored vehicles to the so-called Syrian rebels. This is a war in everything but name. And they're still out there trying to convince us that this is a war on ISIS and Al-Qaeda when the U.S. keeps missing ISIS and Al-Qaeda and hitting Syrian economic assets.
Isn't that a joke? Syrian democratic forces. There ain't nothing democratic about any of this. There is no spreading democracy. What another scam. You're just bringing empire. Not just us, the globalists, bankers, NATO, EU, Britain, France, and Germany, because Britain's was the #1 arming Saudi Arabia, which is funding ISIS, like they're funneling weapons also. So everybody knows the battle lines are drawn and the sides are being formed. It's global ship going on. Iran, Russia, China, the group.
Yeah, look at the world's least peaceful countries right now, and they all have one thing in common. The U.S. is bringing them democracy. They never actually get it, though. They never actually get it. If you look at all these covert interventions since the end of World War II that are sold to the American people, we're going to bring these people democracy. They never get it. They get dictators like the Shah of Iran and Pinochet and whoever it is they're moving.
They get puppets.
Yeah, you get puppet rule that's ruling your country for the benefit of a foreign country. They don't like it. We shouldn't like it either. We know that our country is being ruled for a foreign power.
And they get destroyed infrastructure and 1.5 million people dead like in Iraq.
And then the bankers go on in and say, we'll loan you the money at interest to rebuild all the stuff that we blew up. Such a deal.
Mike, I have to go out on a limb and say, if one more incident happens, I would be okay with Russia shooting down an Air Force jet. And I don't care if it starts World War III at this point. I really don't. Because I think this is
obviously,
something's got to happen. Because
Putin is trying very hard to walk a fine line. I know that he does not want a full-on war with the United States. I don't think a full-on war with Russia or China is a good idea at this point. I don't think we can win it.
It's coming, Mike.
Yeah, I know.
It's inevitable now. You can tell. You can feel the tensions rising, and things are happening at a quicker pace. It's a scary time, Mike.
It is a very scary time, and one of the reasons that Claire and I are holding off buying a newer car is if we went ahead and bought it and then we get nuked, I'm going to be really, really angry.
Well, I hope it has a good wax job on it. Maybe it can deflect the... Hey, Mike, did you hear about the Wall Street Journal article about Israel, which we all knew this too? Basically giving aid and support to ISIS, treating them for wounds, and all this other stuff. Yeah, see? So that shows you all that conspiracy theories is actually a fact.
Remember there was a trading of fire between Israel forces and ISIS, and they both immediately apologized to each other. We're sorry, we didn't mean to do that.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And, boy, everybody's unhappy at the way things are going. Erdogan is slamming the United States for building air bases in Syrian Kurdistan and basically says the U.S. soldiers are arm in arm with the terrorists. And he's absolutely right. All those documents that came out of the State Department confirm over and over and over again the U.S. ginned up these so-called jihadi groups as proxies to fight these wars so that they could pretend that we're not a warlike, warmongering nation. Article that came on out from Blacklisted News saying that the U.S. intervention in Syria is at a crossroads because of this shoot-down. It's escalated the situation. And basically, the U.S. has stumbled into another quagmire in the Syrian desert around Al-Tamf. They've got a whole bunch of U.S. forces there that are now cut off. They can't move northward. And the big question is whether they'll stay, leave, or try and save face by escalating the war. And given the mindset in Washington, D.C., it's probably going to be that last one. and they're going to make everything much, much worse than it already is. All right, so now then. Apparently there's other tension going on in other parts of the world. Over in Saudi Arabia, apparently 2 Iranian fishing boats in heavy seas brushed up against Saudi Arabia's border. They're not even really sure if they crossed it, but the Saudi Arabian Coast Guard opened fire on the boats. They killed one of the fishermen. And even Saudi Arabia is saying, well, the Coast Guard wasn't supposed to open fire. They're just supposed to chase them on out. But everybody's on a hair trigger over there. And again, they don't actually know if these fishing boats had crossed the border because of the heavy seas here. Now, Saudi Arabia is coming on out and saying that they have arrested Revolutionary Guard saboteurs, who I'm sure are being waterboarded to provide a politically expedient confession even now, trying to ramp up the tension between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Meanwhile, Iran, in retaliation for the claimed ISIS terror attacks in Tehran, it launched ground-to-ground missiles at Daesh headquarters in Syria from western Iran. They are coordinating with Damascus on this. This was done with the Syrian government's permission and cooperation. And so they're just flinging that stuff out there, and they're issuing a warning. There will be more missile strikes if there are any more terrorist attacks inside Iran. Meanwhile, Iran and China are holding a joint naval drill in the Persian Gulf. China is now very concerned about disruptions to the flow of oil coming out of the Gulf, and they're now teaming up with Iran. Meanwhile, over in Israel, Netanyahu's issuing a warning to Iran, we're watching your every move. He's just looking for another excuse to haul on off. Now, a little bit of good news is this nonsense over Qatar appears to be falling apart. They were trying to isolate it. They didn't succeed. Turkey came in on their side. Iran came in on their side. Russia came in on their side. And it looks like this whole blockade thing is starting to fall apart. And you know, you don't go on out and mess with another country without expecting a backflash. And in this case, Qatar has just announced they will, from now on, sell their oil in the yuan rather than the U.S. dollar. So I'm sure Qatar is close to the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. But the U.S. really does need things to calm down in Qatar because of what's going on over in Syria, where this faction fight between these two groups, when the Qatar crisis fanned up, some of these U.S.-backed rebel groups turned on each other and started fighting each other and killing each other off, which is not something the U.S. wants to have happen. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is out there expressing his fury over South Korea's decision to delay any more deployments of the U.S. Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense Missile pending an environmental assessment. Now, it is their country, and they didn't really want the THAAD there anyway. In fact, we're seeing all these grassroots protests, including grandmothers who are out there trying to block access to these facilities by the crews who man them. Now, supposedly, the president of South Korea is coming, talked about it on June 8th at the White House, but nobody's really saying anything. Meanwhile, James Mattis, who never met a war he didn't like, is actually sounding a cautionary tale. North Korea is a war we do not want. And I think he's studying the history of the first and still technically ongoing Korean War. How many people died on both sides? How much money was spent without achieving any kind of an objective? Now, I'm hoping that Moon Jae-in is going to be able to come to terms with Kim Jong-un and say, let's just cancel this so-called ceasefire, let's have an armistice, let's officially shut down the Korean War, ask the United States to take their toys and go home, and reunify. Because they were talking about this seriously like 6 years ago. And, of course, the U.S. goes on in and says, you don't want to reunify those people. They do terrible things to cabbage. Or whatever it was they said to throw a monkey wrench in there. But James Mattis is absolutely right. North Korea could easily turn into another Vietnam, grinding up lives and munitions and money to no real goal, no real achievable end. And again, running the risk of a war with China. Now, meanwhile, Putin has deployed the Russian Buk M3 missile system to their border near North Korea to basically say, if North Korea does fling rockets, we will be able to take care of it. Maybe. I'm sure Putin understands that the real goal of the U.S. trying to plant these terminal high-altitude area defense missiles all over the Russian border is it basically counts as an anti-ballistic missile system. And it's a violation of treaty, of course. And this may be Putin getting ready to say, well, we're going to have the same thing, which makes a potential nuclear exchange very, very problematic. Now, there's been a bit of a diplomatic kerfuffle, if you will. Apparently, a diplomatic delegation from North Korea was very badly maltreated by U.S. authorities. In fact, the North Korean government is saying they behave like gangsters. Must have been TSA, I guess. But it's triggered a diplomatic incident, and that's not going to help tone things down. Meanwhile, story coming on out of Asia Times is looking at a new Cold War brewing in the Indian Ocean with this informal alliance of the United States, India, Australia, and Japan on one side, and China on the other, over those islands in the South China Sea. And again, at the end of World War II, everybody agreed those islands belonged to China. It was called the Cairo Convention, when they basically went on in and said, Japan's got to give all this stuff back that they conquered, and who gets what. And all of the victorious allies signed this agreement, saying those islands belong to China. So, here, have you seen how quickly this Cuban thing has just fallen apart? Apparently, the United States is punishing an American company after its Canadian subsidiary leased cars to the Cuban embassy in Ottawa. And again, this is a Canadian company operating in Canada that leased cars to the Cuban embassy. And the U.S. is going after the parent company. I am really upset over Donald Trump's reversal on Cuba for two reasons. First of all, if we are going to go into a Cold War situation with Russia, the last thing we want is to drive Cuba into the Russian sphere of influence, which is the mistake the U.S. government made back after the Bay of Pigs, back after the Castro Revolution. When Castro kicked out Batista, the first thing he said is, I want to be friends with the United States government. You're just 90 miles away from me. All I ask is that you pay fair market value for our agricultural produce. And companies like PepsiCo and United Fruit said, no, we are supposed to get a discount. And basically they started the embargo, and that's what drove Cuba into the Soviet sphere of influence, leading ultimately to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Do you want to really make that mistake again? And the second reason I'm very unhappy with the reversal, of course, on Cuba was I was looking forward to getting some of those Cuban cigars. And now it's not going to happen. And I am really very, very angry about that. All right, we're going to start a phone call here. Peter in Los Angeles, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Michael, I'm just calling about the Syrian aircraft incident and so on. And I think one of the things that the Russians, I'm sure, have given assurance before.
Okay, Peter, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We're going to take 3 minutes for commercials.
Okay.
Don't hang up. I'll come right back to you. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. We're talking about the U.S. shoot down of a Syrian Sukhoi fighter plane, which apparently was bombing ISIS contrary to the claims by the U.S. government, and it sparked a serious escalation where Russia is now saying that any U.S. Aircraft, drones, whatever, west of the Euphrates are going to be tracked and targeted. They're stopping short of saying they'll shoot the U.S. planes down unless the U.S. planes are doing something icky, and now it looks like the U.S. is sort of backing off and repositioning the aircraft to sort of get away from that danger zone. Anyway, Peter, please continue where you left off.
Yeah. Let me make a quick thing. By the way, that your plea for donors, by the way, it was the best written and most flawlessly delivered anything of this kind I've ever heard. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Mike, the Russians, I'm sure, have given us warning many times before to not do incursions into their zone or bomb their troops or Syrian government troops. And the United States, of course, increasingly desperate to support its terrorists who are being defeated. I think that's the reason, Mike, that we've seen that the introduction of the MLRS, the multiple launch rocket systems, which are not point weapons, but they're long range and they're area weapons. And each one of them are filled with all these bomblets,
yes,
like DBU stuff, and even without a drone, which itself can be shot down, for an area thing, they can spot where the Russian SA-400 or SA-300, whatever it is they're operating there, from a satellite that can't be shot down, and then use that to target the anti-aircraft with the MLRS. So not only can we support our terrorists that way, but we can also clear out the anti-aircraft systems that are arrayed and keeping us from doing so.
Well, the first question I would have is why not use the S-400 to shoot down those rockets from the launcher before they can deploy their submunitions?
I don't know if they can do that, Mike. I know they're very capable, but I don't know how capable. But that's just my theory on that, based on what I know about the MLRS. But I know the S-400 is feared, but I don't know exactly how feared.
Okay, well, it's an interesting concept, and by the way, at this point, I'm not ready to say that surveillance satellites are totally immune. We know that the U.S. has been testing and deploying anti-satellite weapons. We know China has. We know Russia has. Whether they're available out there now, we don't know. But again, Putin is trying very hard not to let this situation escalate, against an adversary that's just trying to find a way to get this war really going and make it look like it's Russia's fault.
Mike, once they start killing satellites, and I know you know that we've been able to do it since 1979, even with kinetic energy missiles fired from an F-15 at the top of its altitude arc have successfully hit satellites, and I'm sure it's much advanced. Plus that secret army or military thing that has been in the orbit for a year or something.
It just came back recently. It just came back, and nobody really knows what it is or what it does. It certainly seems to carry enough fuel to do a great deal of orbital maneuvering, which would certainly seem to fit the profile of an anti-satellite weapon. The problem, of course, with war in low Earth orbit, we could literally enshroud our planet in a cloud of shrapnel that would basically cut us off from future space exploration.
Mike, I'm not sure on the hierarchy of this, but I would tell you that, in my opinion, starting to knock out satellites like you're describing here, I think that would be just below starting to pop nukes off on the hierarchy of
I would agree. I would agree. It's a serious business. Peter, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I want to talk about the USS Fitzgerald, which is this Arleigh Burke destroyer that was rammed by a Philippine cargo ship just off the coast of Japan. And I've gotten a lot of emails and articles sent to me saying, oh, it had to be the cargo ship's fault. And it may have been. They, you know, middle of the night, they drive those things on autopilot. I even had one email say it was a deliberate attack by the Philippines against the U.S. warship. A fully loaded cargo ship, that's a very expensive item to use as a weapon. Now, cargo ships, you know, commercial shipping, there should have been lookouts. There should have been somebody on the radar. But my concern is that once again we're seeing that the mighty U.S. warships seem to be very fragile. There was an incident a while back where they were experimenting with a drone off of one of the Ticonderoga class ships. And they lost control of the drone, and it literally punched through the very thin metal on the radar housing, broke on in through, and ruined about $30 million worth of computers. And the ship is now, the USS Fitzgerald is now in a port in Japan. They have found the missing sailors, and yes, they did drown in the berthing compartment. But here's my concern. Yes, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. There's a quarter moon overhead. Who was running the ship? It's a warship. It is covered with radars, including skin paint radar. There's a sonar system that should have heard the screws of that cargo ship. And there should have been lookouts, and if the moon wasn't out, they do have night vision equipment on those ships. What the heck happened here? Somebody really messed up somewhere. And I think starting with the officer of the deck, and ultimately, of course, the captain bears ultimate responsibility for what happened. But I think all this talk about, oh, it had to be the cargo ship, is an attempt to distract from the fact that this ship was nearly sunk in this collision. And it underscores a concern I have had about America's modern weapons. They are overly dependent on their active defensive systems, and they lack reasonable armor with which to protect the ship from anything that gets past the active defenses. And remember what happened to the USS Donald Cook up in the Black Sea. Its active defensive systems were shut down by a Russian electronic warfare aircraft. And so if we get into a shooting war with the Russians, we're going to see all these whiz-bang, high-tech active defense systems paralyzed, and then the ship is a sitting duck. And obviously, we ought to be concerned, especially if you have family who are in the Navy. Now, there have been terror attacks around the world, and one was apparently over in Finsbury Park, Great Britain, where somebody rammed into a crowd leaving a mosque. BBC came on out and said it was a lone wolf terror attack, but 4 separate witnesses are saying there were at least 3 men in this van. And so, was this a real terror attack, or did they set up some patsy, for a false flag? Apparently, over in Paris, a man rammed his car into a police vehicle on the Champs-Élysées shopping district, prompted an explosion. Apparently, the driver of the car was killed in the incident. I think everybody's reaching their breaking point. There's been a swarm of arson attacks on Germany's rail system. 13 arson attacks, which led to all kinds of delays for people getting where they needed to go. And apparently cable ducts of rail signaling equipment, the block system, were set on fire in the states of Lower Saxony, Berlin, North Rhine-Westphalia, and Saxony. So they're trying to figure out, what is that? Is it possibly in opposition to the G20? Meanwhile, down in Mali, this one has a kind of a happy ending. This very famous resort, popular with Westerners in Mali, were stormed by gunmen shouting "Aloha Snack Bar." but apparently most of them were rescued. Unfortunately, 2 people are dead. Doesn't really say if it's the attackers or who it was, but by and large, this one had a happy ending. Now, we're still seeing the political fallout from the Grenfell Tower. And yes, there are articles all over saying, isn't it amazing? The Grenfell Tower was fully engulfed and it's still standing. And World Trade Center 7 just had a couple of fires here and there, and it just fell into its own footprints. Everybody's made that connection. We don't need to go into that a little bit more here. But more and more what we're finding out is that they knew there was a problem. People were trying to point it out. In fact, 2 women who are presumed to have died in the fire were questioning the fire safety, and they were threatened with legal action. And this came from the Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organization, the private company that would, first of all, oversaw the renovation. And when people started saying we're concerned about the fire safety, they were threatened with lawsuits. Now, needless to say, people are looking at the Grenfell Tower as kind of a monument to the Tory government, because funding for safety inspections was cut back, and this sort of freewheeling, yeah, we can go ahead with this insulation attitude was that. As it turns out, that type of insulation is illegal in the United States of America, and now we're hearing word it may actually have been illegal in Great Britain as well. Originally, they were saying it's legal for us to use it. Yes, a lot of people died, but it's legal for us to use it. But apparently, that's now being challenged. It may have been a material that was not approved for that building. And even worse, apparently, in a desire to not have to go back in and replace the insulation in the near future, they actually doubled up on its thickness. So there was more of it to burn. Now, Theresa May has taken a major hit as the leader of the Tory party. The Tory party is dealing with huge backlash, and now they're saying that Brexit Secretary David Davis may become the next Tory party leader. They may vote Theresa May out of the leadership, which is certainly going to complicate her job as the Prime Minister. And more people are saying that she may be in her last term in office. Now let's talk about the growing problem of violence here in the U.S., and I'm not talking about, crime in the streets. I'm talking about this political violence that is being encouraged in our society. It's a breakdown in civility. It's a breakdown in respect, and everybody's out there now saying, agree with me or I will hit you with this big round stick. And it's a very, very dangerous situation where everybody seems to be coming to this idea that this is now acceptable behavior, and it isn't. It isn't. Over at MSNBC, one of their hosts, Joy Reid, called Representative Scalise an extremist. He's still in the hospital bed. By the way, they've upgraded his condition from critical to serious. They think he's going to make it. But this Joy Reid was out there saying that Scalise was an extremist because he wants marriage to be between a man and a woman. He voted for the House health care bill, and he co-sponsored a bill to repeal the ban on semi-automatic weapons. And because of this, Joy Reid says he's an extremist. He totally deserved getting shot. It almost sounds like she wants him to die from it. Apparently, at a commencement exercise, current House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi spoke to graduates of the University of California at Berkeley, where they've been having a lot of violence, and said, basically, you need to be disruptors. This is the life guidance Pelosi is giving these new college graduates, who I'm sure their top priority is how the heck they're going to pay off all those student loans. And Pelosi's out there saying, use your newfound knowledge, disrupt the economic system. It's insane here. Okay, now then, as you know, the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz are being sued in a class action lawsuit on behalf of the Bernie Sanders supporters who are feeling that they were cheated, they were defrauded. They donated money to the Democratic Party for Bernie Sanders only to have the Democratic leadership throw the nomination to Hillary Clinton. And the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz lawyers are out there saying they don't really have a complaint. They should have just known that they were going to give that nomination to Hillary Clinton. Really? Well, if you're just going to do that, why did you even have primaries? Unless it was to fraudulently sell the idea that ordinary rank-and-file Democratic voters had a say in who became the candidate. Well, the lawyers who are filing that class action lawsuit have filed a request with the court. They want the court to order protection, not just for the lawyers, but for all their potential witnesses, and they make specific mention of Seth Rich. That people who are a threat to the Clintons die. And we've got the dead bodies list. You've probably read that several times. So they want court-ordered protection. I hope they get it. I really do. Now, getting on over to Robert Mueller, this story is starting to really unravel because apparently, according to Donald Trump's own lawyer, they have not been formally notified of any investigation for anything by the special counsel. There's a whole process that you go through. If you're under investigation, they have to specify, we are investigating you for blah. First it was the Russian collusion. That went nowhere. There was never really an investigation into it. Now they're trying to mutate it into obstruction of justice, but as of right now, they have not been served with any paperwork that says the president is under investigation. Meanwhile, over at the corporate media, oh yes, he's under investigation. He's under investigation for keeping his library books past their deadline. He's under investigation for tearing the tags off of the couch cushions. And they're just out there trying to tarnish the guy. And I'll be the first one to admit, I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump, especially on the issue of these foreign interventions. We seem headed into a world war. As that first caller said, it almost seems inescapable at this point. But he is the president. He's got the job. He won the election. And there's a certain decorum that ought to be observed, not just by ordinary citizens, but by that corporate media. Meanwhile, Robert Mueller is loading up his office of the special counsel with all his cronies and all his buddies. And these are some of the highest priced lawyers in the country. That they're going to stick the taxpayers with that bill. And apparently one of the 13 attorneys Mueller has hired used to work for the Clinton Foundation and defended the Clinton Foundation from allegations it was running as a racketeering enterprise. And this was attorney Jeannie Rhee, and defended the foundation from Freedom of Information Act requests filed by conservative activists who suspected the organization's behavior was directly linked to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's improper use of a private email server. And we know there's a lot of there. There was the pay for play. So basically, Mueller's independent counsel is loaded up with Democrats, cronies, Hillary supporters. It can't be seen by anybody that this is going to be fair and impartial. It's a hatchet squad. Now, Jamie Gorelick, Kushner's current lawyer, works at WilmerHale, the same firm Mueller worked at before taking on the job of special counsel. Now, there's an article here over in Zero Hedge, The Fallacies of the Russia Truthers, and it basically just goes on down the list of all the claims that have been made about Donald Trump did this, Donald Trump did that, he's using Russian dressing, he listens to Russian, all of this stuff, none of which came on back with any proof. And they're still out there trying to push that. So the net result is the big collusion narrative has melted down, and now they're trying to find something else. But again, the statute that covers the special counsel says special counsels are appointed to investigate a specific designated crime, in this case collusion. Mueller does not really have the legal authority to say, I'm going to go look at obstruction of justice. I'm going to go look at whether Trump's tie clashes with his handkerchief. I'm going to go look and see if there are wads of gum underneath the president's desk. He's not allowed to do that. So it is just this hatchet job that's out there. Let's see. Corey Lewandowski is saying, what is Robert Mueller's job anymore? Because there's been no collusion. It fell apart. What's he moving on to? And is he even allowed to move on to it? Okay. Now, as you know, former FBI Director James Comey told President Trump 3 times he was not under investigation for collusion with Russia, but that information could not be revealed to the public. And, of course, Donald Trump is out there saying, I'm being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. And it is amazing. It's almost, in fact, it's shameful the way the snowflakes are still going after the president. Okay? Hillary lost. We didn't like her. Get over it. It's time to grow on up. Now, the good news is the Senate Republicans are shifting the focus to Loretta Lynch. Did she, in fact, cover up for the crimes of Hillary Clinton? Yes, she did. She told James Comey to refer to that whole email thing as a matter and not an investigation. And again, she and Comey went down the list of felony violations of Title 18 that Hillary was guilty of, and still, now we're not going to prosecute. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So we're talking about this story on how the Senate Republicans are saying it is time to look at former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Was she, in concert with former head of the FBI, James Comey, protecting Hillary Clinton? And the preponderance of evidence is, yes, that's exactly what was going on. They were protecting Hillary Clinton. They were protecting that email server. They were protecting the Clinton Foundation. In other words, they were protecting the narcocracy, because that's what all of this goes back to. That CIA gun and drug running operation out of Arkansas back in the 1980s under then Governor Bill Clinton. That's why they're untouchable. They've got the dirt that could literally bring the CIA down. So, yeah, it's time to focus on Lynch. Look at all the time and money and media attention that have been poured into these non-existent stories of President Trump and 2 prostitutes in Moscow, or President Trump making James Comey uncomfortable, and therefore that constitutes obstruction of justice. And by the way, it doesn't. There has to be an overt statement, verbal or in writing, saying, do not pursue this case. That's obstruction of justice. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Now, speaking about protecting the elites, I'm very unhappy with this decision, and I'm sure you will be as well. This is reported over at 12160.info. Apparently, the Supreme Court early today said former George Bush administration officials cannot be held liable for the unlawful detainment and abuse suffered by undocumented immigrants detained after the 9/11 terrorist acts. And basically he said, you can't sue them. And this includes former Attorney General John Ashcroft and former FBI Director Robert Mueller, who I'm sure is hoisting a few in celebration right now. And the Supreme Court said basically that these officials cannot be sued without Congress first authorizing it. So it's official. We live in a 2-tier system of justice. Ordinary people can be sued, can go to jail. The elites cannot be without the permission of the United States Congress. Julian Assange is marking the 5th anniversary of his asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. A little bit of a dubious celebration, but at least he's still there. Meanwhile, Ron Paul is going to be interviewing Edward Snowden tomorrow on his Liberty Report. So that's probably something you're going to want to tune into. It's going to be probably a lot more enlightening and entertaining than Megyn Kelly's interview with Alex Jones, which, by the way, tanked in the ratings. And, of course, the people who are part of the Sandy hoax didn't tune in. And those of us who are fans of Alex Jones, we knew it was going to be a hatchet job on him, so we didn't really tune on in either. And apparently, Megyn Kelly got Alex to admit to having lied on certain issues. So it went very, very badly for Alex Jones, unfortunately. But then that's what Megyn does. Thank goodness nobody was watching. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And the Supreme Court did something I do agree with. And it has to do with a case called Mattel versus Tam, where there was this band that wanted to call themselves the Slants. And they're Asian American, and they thought this would be cool. And the U.S. Trademark Office said, no, you can't call yourself that. And the Supreme Court ruled that just because something is offensive, might offend somebody, you can't suppress it. And so they have basically overruled this federal trademark restriction that you can't register a trademark that might offend somebody, which I think would be good. I mean, I remember early in my advertising career, there was a phase the ad industry went through of deliberately being offensive to try and attract attention. So, yeah, bad words are protected free speech, except here on the radio. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, I was watching that interview yesterday on Alex Jones' show. He extended it, and you know, him and Mike Smirnovich and a couple other people were going through it. 2 mistakes he's made, okay? One is he's got to stop backing away from Sandy hoax. He's got to start going and, you know, mentioning Wolfgang Halbig. He should have Halbig back in his show again. He's got to show all of the indiscrepancies to show that, I mean, it's so obvious that this is a hoax, that nobody actually was killed, that Adam Lanza never even existed. And he's got, the other mistake he made, I think, is he should have told Megyn Kelly, you know, I know you're going to, and he did know she was going to start editing the whole thing. So he should have said, if you want to interview me, you interview on my show, live, so there's no BS, so everybody will know that, you know, everything I say, and you won't be able to edit or anything else. Those are his two biggest mistakes. I don't think it's going to hurt him, really. I think he did a good thing by taping her, at least, you know, and showing her to be a liar.
Yes.
She is when she said she's not. But I think he could have blown her out of the water had he done it properly. I don't think she would have even taken a challenge like that as far as being on his show, but you never know.
Now the version you're talking about on Alex Jones is the unedited one that he put on out there late last week to basically get around the fact that Megyn Kelly was going to edit the interview to make him look as bad as possible. Correct?
Right, but yeah, that, and also the fact that he actually got her to. He showed that from the time she first called him, he recorded all of that and showed that she was. You know, she said, "Oh, I'm not going to do. I just want to do a little profile on you. I'm impressed by the way you handle yourself in a custody case. I realize you're a father." You know, she tried to butter him up that way.
Yeah.
Whether he fell for that or not, I don't know, but at least he did tape it. But then again, he's got. I made all kinds of comments on it because I saw it on my Facebook. I was watching on my Facebook. I'm getting it now. I get it in the show, and I kept on commenting. Stop backing away from Sandy. Even Steve Pieczenik, you know, the former, the psychiatrist and a former CIA and military man and everything like that, who now, you know, even knows that 9/11 was false. Like even Pieczenik was telling him that Sandy hoax is false, but he kept on going a bit. Oh, I don't want to, you know, those kids lost, you know, they lost their kids. Nobody lost anybody. These are actors. They were there for about 2 or 3 years. They all came there about the same time, Okay, a lot of people had their mortgages paid off.
Yep.
It was the Homeland Security had already had that thing had signs out days before this thing even happened. It's so obvious that this is a fraud.
Yes.
And I don't know why Jones is backing away from it. He was the first one, as far as I know, to bring out that this was he was the first one, I think, that had Wolfgang Halbig on. And you know how Halbig got involved? Halbig is a regular guy. He's a retired teacher,
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a whole lot of money. And you know what got him involved? He was a school security expert at the same time. People used to call him for security stuff, and he tried to give some. He tried to find out what happened and give some information how they could prevent something like this again. And he got Lake County Sheriff's deputies. That's the county he lives in Florida. Lake County Sheriff's deputies came to his house and threatened him.
Yeah.
Because they said the cops in Connecticut, and he said that's what got the wolf started. That's what he said. And I've talked to him numerous times already. So he puts his phone number out for people to call. I mean, the guy is 100% legit. He is what you call a real, true American patriot, right? And he actually, he didn't believe any of this false flag stuff before. Now he fully believes it. Now he understands what this stuff is about. And I wish I know you've had him on your show. I wish you'd have him on again because he's in the dump right now. People are backing away from him. The only one that I know is still sticking with him is John B. Wells. He's got lawsuits coming out of the yin yang.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, really, Alex Jones, all the money he's got could actually help him through a lot of his.
Well, let's be very careful about how much money Alex Jones has because he just went through that rather horrendous divorce, and because of the circumstances leading to the divorce, the courts basically ruled against him. We don't actually know what Alex Jones has to work with right now. We know he's got his studio and all the rest of that, but we don't know what his cash position is. And that may be the reason that he is backing off Sandy Hoax. He may have been threatened with a lawsuit, or one of his financial backers is saying, we're going to give you another couple of million if you will back away from Sandy Hoax. That's the problem when you start getting large amounts of money to build up your network with, is it comes with strings. And that's why you look at the small-scale operations like whatreallyhappened.com, and you understand they don't have a leash on them.
Right. But, what about John B. Wells? John B. Wells lets it all out, too. I mean, he doesn't play. I think one of the problems, too, is Jones is on too many AM and FM stations now, and he has to deal with their advertising, their sponsors and stuff. And I think they might put some control. I think he just wants to be too big too quick.
Well, I've been saying for a while that I think Jones wants to cross over. He wants to be corporate media. And I think that's why he went ahead and agreed to do the Megyn Kelly interview, is that he has dreams of shedding his independent, alternative, standing there with a bullhorn image and actually become part of the corporate media. And I certainly wish him.
He wants to do that.
What?
You really think he wants to do that? You really think he wants to do that? I mean, he's the one. It's Alex Jones more than anybody else that brought me into understanding what this government was doing. It was Alex Jones that made me start questioning 9/11 and some of the other matters, and even going back to Oklahoma City and all that. It was listening to people like Jones, and then I started getting into other things on the internet. Remember, I didn't even know what a mouse was up until about 2004, 2005.
Okay.
When they talked about a mouse, I was wondering, what are they talking about? Okay, so I didn't know about that much. But once I started getting into the net, and once I started getting into listening to people like Alex Jones, that's what turned me on to what was happening. Okay, that's what, and I just can't believe he would do that. I mean, you might be right. I hope not. But I really can't believe that he's going to. Does he actually think he's going to keep his audience to be that sad? He's going to lose everything. If he tries to, give up what he should start going back to being the Alex Jones of old, grab the bullhorn, stop trying to be friends with the Trump people. And I don't know whether the Trump people aren't putting pressure on him, too, to tone it down. That's my suspicion also, that the White House is getting to him.
Yes.
Because, I really don't know. But the fact of the matter is, for the most part, he's still pretty good. I mean, he's not campaigning for war against Syria or war against Russia. He does think that the Syrian, that the gas attack was a false flag. However, he seems to think that it's okay for Trump to bomb the Syrian to bomb the Syrian airfield anyway. So,
well, if Alex Jones is cozying up to the Trump administration, to me that is another indicator that he sees an opportunity, especially as the existing corporate media is clearly in decline. I think Alex is seeing himself as possibly becoming the new face of the new corporate media. Anyway, Mark, we're going to let you go here. We've got another call we need to get through. We're going to do a quick shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. And Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Megan Kelly, Steve Pachenik, Alex Jones. Yeah, I'm very, I followed, I basically studied. I tape recorded on cassettes Alex Jones shows for many years. In fact, I had many with the dates, all of them had the dates. Alex Jones, who the guests were, your name was on quite a few of them. I took them all to the dump recently. I had hundreds and hundreds of them. So I know Alex Jones. I've studied him quite a bit. I used to defend him all the time on the internet. When I was on the internet, I used to write like blogs about defending Alex Jones and justifying his positions and his, being compromised, selling out on a lot of different issues, until I couldn't do it anymore. But Dr. Steve Pachenik's a very interesting guy. Megan Kelly, by the way, she is the epitome of a prostitute. I mean, yes. She's probably sociopathic, might be a psychopath. She's a terrible, horrible person. But anyway, Dr. Steve Pachenik, yeah, I think he was associated with the creation of Delta Force. He was associated with the CIA, State Department. He was head of PSYOPs, I think, in the military at some point. I mean, this guy, psychiatrist, medical doctor, goes on and on and on and on and on, his credentials. He talks about 9/11 being a false flag inside job and all that. He does dismiss Sandy Hook. He says it didn't happen. He says he was associated still in the intelligence circles when that happened. And he says he knows for a fact that it didn't happen. I don't know. I'm not saying I believe everything Steve Pachenik says either, but I'm very skeptical of Sandy Hook and all these things. But Steve Pachenik made some very interesting observations about his buddy Alex Jones yesterday, and I think it made Alex very uncomfortable. He went down a list. He says, Megan Kelly does not know what she's up against. For one, Alex, she doesn't realize that you are an expert at PSYOPs. And she does not understand, what your talent of mixing fact and fiction. And see, that's been one of my criticisms of Alex for many years. In order to make things more palatable, whatever you can justify it any way you want. But he does mix. He knowingly mixes facts with fiction. He does it a lot.
Well, Megan Kelly got him to admit that on the air, and that's a major disaster. I wish Alex hadn't done that.
Yeah, well, she's come out of it stinking pretty badly as well.
Yeah, the ratings just weren't there, and I think network management is in a panic over her. They don't know what to do. It's $15 million. That's what her contract is worth, and now they don't know what to do with her.
Well, she has no credibility. She'll never have any credibility again. She's proven that she's a liar,
Yep.
So she'll do anything she can. She's very ambitious, and she'll do anything. I mean, she has no standards, no morals, no ethics as far as journalism, anything like that. So anyway, all right. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Alex in San Antonio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling because I don't know if you mentioned this yet, but there was these attacks in Syria where one of our F-16s or F-18s maybe
F-18.
brought down an F-18 brought down an Su-22 over the weekend, and here's what I'm kind of thinking. I'd like to know what you think. Is it possible that there's the desperation within the paramilitary forces that have gone rogue within the Pentagon that are driven by the rogue intelligence personnel. Do you think that they're trying to set Trump up? They're going to say, well, we're going to fight this war with or without your consent, with or without the consent of the American people? It's
certainly a real possibility. I mean, this was flat out a dumb thing to do. The Pentagon is trying to claim that this Sukhoi 22 was a threat to the U.S.-backed rebels who are still, you know, again, enemies of the state of Syria. But the Syrian government, the Russian military, and even the Kurds are all saying that the Sukhoi was actually attacking ISIS at the time the U.S. shot it down.
Right, which is why I'm saying they were the intelligence forces were the rogue intelligence forces were under attack, and this is why they had to use perhaps something that would be considered more of a government military equipment in order to handle that.
Well, one of the areas that Russia is very concerned about, as you know, there was this agreement where the Russian forces and the U.S. forces would communicate with each other to keep their planes out of each other's way, and Russia is very upset that the U.S. did not, in fact, notify Russia ahead of time of the coming shoot-down, and so Russia has basically dropped that whole agreement, and they're saying that any U.S. aircraft of any kind that flies west of the Euphrates River will be tracked and targeted. Now, they stopped short of saying we're just going to automatically shoot anything down that you fly over there, but obviously if a U.S. plane flies west of the Euphrates and attacks some of the forces on the ground, then yes, it risks being shot down, and apparently the U.S. is already pulling some of their planes back.
See, that's the thing. That's what kind of sends you this message where it's like, okay, there's forces within the Pentagon that don't want they don't want to participate. They don't want to have any equipment near a place where it could get commandeered by, like I said, rogue agents. And then you have
no, that's not true. They just sent a 7th shipment of machine guns and armored vehicles to the U.S.-backed rebels.
Yeah, Mike, but that's all. I mean, I've worked in the distribution industry. I know how it could be very simple to get something from one place, procure it in another place, and then have it sent through by someone else in another way, and have it made to look like, hey, look, these people just sent us this. You know, so I mean, that's more of an optics thing. You know, what I wanted to ask you next was, how about this ship over in Japan that got rammed supposedly? Yes. The hole in that ship does not look like it was like that was an accident. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm trying to say. Like, do you think that perhaps they were using the intelligence forces were using these merchant ships, and they got up, the Navy got in their face, and that's what happened?
No, I don't agree with you on that one. I think it was a genuine accident. The question is, the USS Fitzgerald.
How did that happen?
Hang on. What was 2 o'clock in the morning? You know, everybody's like, you know, on that graveyard watch. Obviously, somebody wasn't paying attention on both ships. There should have been lookouts out there, especially for the USS Fitzgerald. It's got sonar. Should have been hearing those screws in the water. The lookout should have been out there. Okay, so yeah, something really bad happened. Now, it looks to me like the cargo ship was on autopilot, which a lot of cargo ships are on autopilot for reasons of fuel economy and getting to. But that still doesn't obviate the need for lookouts. But again, we know the merchant marine is a little bit less dedicated and focused than the military marine. And obviously, at this point, I have to say somebody on the Fitzgerald really, really messed up. I mean, first of all, that this idea of a deliberate ramming, that cargo ship can't turn that fast. The Fitzgerald could outrace it. Somebody just wasn't paying attention.
Okay. Well, your analysis is very plausible. Like I said, it just seems very odd because of the timing and the whole optics of it. But thank you very much, Mike. You're having a great show.
Thank you very much. I mean, look how many accidents there are out there. The accidental ramming of the Kursk, the sinking of this Japanese fishing teaching boat here in Hawaii some years ago. Unfortunately, there does seem to be an issue in terms of navigating and guiding some of these U.S. warships. especially submarines. Anyway, we're going to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Alan in Texas, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Michael, just on that ship, kind of brings back memories of the Pentagon, hey? Because aren't you pretty sure that they've got satellite tracking systems that tracks everywhere those ships go, anything that comes into contact with it, kind of like probably every mosquito and every gnat that gets within a quarter mile of the Pentagon is tracked and traced where it came from, where it goes, and what it did while it was on the Pentagon grounds, But I was going to talk about the gentleman before Frank. I can't remember his name. You were talking about Alex Jones and how he, you think that he might, think that he's becoming, the new mainstream and everything. Well, I don't have the way to do it, but I'm pretty sure it was on last Wednesday, like a minute 36, a minute 38, right in that 2 or 3 minute time frame. I heard him say, I believe he was probably talking about the shooting in Virginia, of course. And I forgot, I didn't write down exactly what he was talking about, but I heard him say, well, other MSM are talking about it too. Because someone was complaining about something, and he said, well, other MSM are talking about this too. Slip of the tongue, who knows?
There's the giveaway. Okay.
Yeah, and also, I don't discount anyone because he does get information out. So I use my own brain to filter out what's fact and what's folly as much as I can. But you're in Hollywood. When he comes out and says things, I heard him say, well, everyone knows that the Saudis basically run Hollywood. I just that was like, yeah, well, okay, from now on, anything he says, I definitely question. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm not in Hollywood anymore. I'm in Hawaii.
Well, but you were there, and
I was there for a long time. Yes.
Did you see the Saudis in control out there?
No, absolutely not.
Didn't think so.
Nope.
I've got cousins that work out there, and last time I talked with him, he said, man, I'm getting really sick of the Jews out here. He said, man, just their attitudes and the way they treat people, it's just really pissing me off.
Well, again, I have to come on out and say, yeah, there are some real nasty people out there, like, there was that whole Bagelman scandal over at the Warner Studios, but there are some very wonderful people. And anytime somebody talks to me about the Jews in Hollywood, I go back to thinking about dear friend Renee Valenti, who passed away a short time ago, so I can talk about her now without ending her career. And she was an absolute love. Everybody loved her. And she was kind of my Hollywood mom, and in fact, she was one of the few people who stayed in contact with me after my blacklisting. And, we stayed very, very close friends up until she passed away. And somebody says, Jews this, Jews that. I remember Renee Valenti was a wonderful, wonderful human being. And she did it the right way.
Yeah,
she was ethical. She didn't cheat anybody. She was just very, very good at what she did.
Yeah, I understand that perfectly. Like I said, we tend to paint things with a broad brush, but then I've done the disclaimer. It's like, well, the good Jews know who they are, and they've got to know that, as a majority, their religion has done nefarious things, in the past and is doing them now. We all know that there's good people out there who call themselves Jews, and there's bad people that call themselves Jews. But, I've done that before, and I've had people jump down my throat, well, do we have to give this disclaimer every time, if they're a Jew, they're a Jew, and it's like, and I'm like, no, so what is with you? But, I understand the whole process. I understand that there are good people everywhere, in every religion. I mean, there's good Hindus, good Muslims, there's good everyone. It's just, as a general rule, what we see going on in the world, can we make generalizations? Well, we do, because, what else do you do? As a group, yeah, but, the good ones know who they are.
Yeah, they really do. Another one, Steven Spielberg. Literally he came on out to speak at a graduate level film class. We got to talking. He invited me up to Universal, introduced me to Jack McMasters, Verna Fields, and was very instrumental in getting my career in special effects started. So again, you have to say, there are good people, there are bad people, and focus on the good ones. Focus on the good ones.
Yeah, I agree, but you can't forget about the bad ones out there either, because that's what they want you to do.
Yeah, you got to watch out. You got to watch out.
Maybe in the back.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we've got 2 more callers, but I'm going to wait until after we come back from this next break, because we don't really have enough time to go on in there. Hollywood is kind of a weird experience. Everybody there is either an angel or a shark. There's almost no middle ground. and it's just something that you need to be aware of. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We got a couple of callers waiting on the line. Before I get to them, though, Fox News is actually running a story pointing out that Robert Mueller is hiring all these Hillary donors and supporters for his staff. And he's going to create a situation where nobody is going to trust him to be fair, impartial, and objective. It is a witch hunt. It's a hatchet job. Meanwhile, over at CNN, after months and months of attacks on President Trump and Russia this and all the rest of that, and he made James Comey feel uncomfortable and constitutes obstruction. Apparently, CNN ran an online poll, should Donald Trump be investigated for obstruction of justice? Over 70% of the respondents said no. So it's another indicator that the corporate media is no longer able to control what we are thinking, as Mika Brzezinski declared was their job some months ago. All right, let's see. We're going to go to Lenny in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Doing okay.
Hey, listen, I want to bring up something no one has said pertaining to the two ships that collided. When the story broke last Friday night, according to ABC News, Muir, whatever his name is, Bill Muir, the guy who does the national news, said that according to maritime law, the bigger ship, the cargo ship, has the right of way.
Yes, that's true.
Because in case of emergency, it has a more difficult time maneuvering. So that should answer that question as to who was at fault.
You're absolutely correct. There is an order for right-of-way on various ships. Sailboats under sail are very much up at the top because they can't always maneuver. But you're right. The cargo ships and the supercarriers, they are the unquestioned boss. You get out of their way. And again, my issue is the USS Fitzgerald is a warship. It's got skin paint radar. It's got sonar. It should have had lookouts. We know that there was a quarter moon overhead, so it's not like it was absolutely dark like when the Titanic happened. So somebody dropped the ball there.
Yeah, so to the former caller, we can move on from that because according to maritime law, the Fitzgerald was at fault. So that's that. The next thing I want to move on to is what you were discussing with the caller about Alex Jones looking to be mainstream. And I am inclined to agree with you simply because I've been studying people like Alex Jones for a long time, and like many of your shows I have recorded, many of his shows I have recorded. Okay, so it's easy for me to go back to the archives and pick up tendencies. And the one tendency I kept picking up is that he always said that he and Matt Drudge were the leaders in alternative media. And Matt Drudge has never missed an opportunity to raise bait and then hide under the covers after he's done it. That's the first thing. Now, I think you're right. I think that there is an attempt to relabel mainstream media to a friendly form of alternative media, and they want to give it to the likes of Alex Jones and Matt Drudge, and I'm going to throw you a new term in here called alternative propaganda. That is the intent from my perspective. Okay?
Well, there's absolutely no question that a lot of the independent media are being acquired or co-opted. Again, we saw this amazing transition over at Breitbart. They're trying to buy it all up, but there's just too much of it out here. And every time they compromise a given independent media outlet, 3 more rise up to take its place.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Instead of people like me who listen and choose who's getting out the most truth, no matter what the cost, as you put it the other day, let justice be done, though the heavens fall. Okay? This is where we are. We're either on the right side or we're on the wrong side. We're either on the side of truth or we're on the side of falsehood. We're on the side of reality or the side of what they call fake news. Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically, they are trying to choose for us what they consider. There's nothing they can do knew about the alternative media. But now they want a guy who they think we should choose as being the alternative media. But I've already made my choice, so that's beside the point when it comes to me. Now, another thing I want to get to, and I know you got a long show, but let me just say this. The shooter, I'm not so sure I want to blame it on psychotropic drugs. And I'm going to tell you why. I think it's simple. Programming of the wetware. And it only works on the minds of the weak. And you got people like this guy whose default setting is a simple need to be something in life. Okay, you look at the TV, and you see people like LeBron James making $50 million a year shooting a basketball. People throwing a baseball making money. People like the Kardashians, they're doing nothing, and they feel the need to be somebody, even if it's on the side of infamy. They just feel the need to be somebody. So I think that only on the minds of the weak can you program the wetware to think that you're doing the world good by doing what he did, and I mean, I'll get to something else later in another call, but that takes me to the so-called assassination of Caesar, and I'm looking at
hang on, before you go there, I understand what you're saying. The problem is, looking back at Hodgkinson's life, he doesn't have the pattern of an attention seeker. He lived most of his life just working at his job, working in construction, and he was involved politically, but he doesn't fit the pattern of somebody who just wants everybody's attention on himself. And again, I don't know that prescription antidepressants had anything to do with this, but I think it's a legitimate question to ask if he was on them.
And okay, and I can go with that, but all I'm asking you to do is entertain the thought that, because we have a lot of people out here like this. They just, they want to be important. They want to, it's not saying, they just feel the need to, they feel their worth is of nothing. Because everything we see that is of worth is just false. So all I ask is that you entertain the thought. But in any case, I want to get back to the so-called assassination of Caesar, and all the assassins are black men and white women. That bothers me. Okay,
wait a minute. Are you talking about the play that was going on in?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
All right.
Yeah, take a look at it. And once again, I think we're being set up as weapon systems against one another. Just think about it.
Well, certainly we're seeing from the left this encouraging of violence as a legitimate form of expression, and it is very, very dangerous. They could start a civil war that way. But again, I'm kind of glad that some people went in to that Shakespeare presentation and just kind of disrupted it. Because I think it was very inappropriate. It's inappropriate for them to have Caesar dressed up as the president and then have the assassination. I think what Kathy Griffin did was very inappropriate. And again, when you have freedom of speech in this country, there's a goes withness, which is the responsibility to choose carefully what you say or what you do, and not just go on out there with all kinds of nonsense and lies just because you think you have a right to lie. Because you don't. The First Amendment is about protecting the truth, not protecting lies.
Right. Real quick, I ran across a cartoon over the weekend. I don't know if you saw it. It had a reporter, a mainstream media reporter, interviewing a Democrat in the form of a donkey in a suit. And the reporter said to the donkey in the suit, how could the shooter have developed so much hate for Trump and the GOP? The doctor said, I don't know. It's baffling. But in any case, hopefully, someone can see in the cartoon. I'll try and send it to you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. Lenny, we're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Ralph in New York City. Ralph, thank you for being so patient. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, Mike. How you doing? I want to ask you a question. Under Donald Trump, what would Agenda 21 would be like under? Would the Obama agenda will be applied under Agenda 21 with Trump in office, or it will be totally different?
Well, first of all, Agenda 21 has been delayed. They're already calling it Agenda 30. Again, Agenda 30 is coming out of the United Nations and the globalists. The only question is what politicians can be brought on board that agenda within their own countries. And unfortunately, some of the politicians who have come on board that agenda with all this immigration and other nonsense are now getting the heave-ho by their voters, and I think that's a very healthy sign.
And the impact on real estate in the inner cities, would that also be a loss or a benefit to the property owners in major cities like Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and the inner city? What would that be like?
It's kind of very, very hard to say. The problem is that anytime there's social upheaval and turmoil, property prices are going to go down. And so I don't think the globalists are going to be able to achieve their vision of a one-world government without a lot of chaos and bloodshed between here and there. And that is...
Well, George Soros is part of it too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No question.
So no, because I was saying that Donald Trump is trying to put lower jobs in manufacturing to the suburbs of lower America to get it away from the inner cities. And that's going to be a big hit on developers that have property development in major cities. Is that really true?
Yeah, obviously, if people are moving out of the cities, especially places like Chicago with the high violent crime rate, yeah, they're returning.
New York too.
They're returning to the rural existence. I mean, I'm a farm kid. I prefer living out in the country, in farming country, and yeah, it's a threat to the plans of the developers. The bankers, the money junkies, they want humans just crowded into these very tight, compact, high-density human ranches called cities because it's easier to make money off of them that way.
And millennials are probably the stupidest generation ever because it's all about paying more for less, and they want bigger rooftops and big parties, and they realize that these young kids are living with their mothers and fathers and hedge funds. They're the ones that are going to be affected big time, right, Mike?
Again, it's a very, very complex issue, and we're just going to have to let that unfold. Okay?
Wow. It's amazing. All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks an awful lot for the phone call here. Now then, getting on to the economic news, this is very alarming. Dianne Feinstein has sponsored a Senate bill which will require you, the citizen, to register your cash that is not being kept in a bank. And it basically, if you're found in violation, if you have unregistered cash or Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or whatever, you can go to jail for 10 years. And its initial implementation is that when you travel, if you have over $10,000, you have to basically reveal it to the security people at the airport, at which point you run the risk of civil forfeiture because that much money can be used for financing terrorism or drug dealing. So it's a darned if you do and darned if you don't situation because if you're traveling with money and you register it because of this new bill, then they can turn around and basically grab it under civil forfeiture. We are living in an age where the government is literally surviving by pillaging its own population. I'm afraid our various authorities, police, TSA, whatever, are behaving very much like Sir Guy of Gisborne's tax collectors, just riding across the countryside and stealing chickens and pigs and farmers' daughters wherever they feel like, because it is totally, totally out of control. Now, as you know, down in Texas, they're getting ready to start a gold depository because Texas is going to create an internal banking system where the accounts are backed by gold. And obviously the Federal Reserve would rather this not happen. The Federal Reserve is still upset about the Bank of North Dakota, where that won't go away. But people are turning away from this fiat debt-based currency. They're coming to understand it's not a monetary system, it is a system of enslavement. Now, as you know, in response to not really much at all, the U.S. has ramped up more sanctions against Russia, and it is causing a huge upset all across the European Union. Germany has issued a stinging rebuke of these new U.S. sanctions, and they're actually threatening economic retaliation against the United States if these new sanctions wind up harming German companies. we could literally see Germany and much of Europe pivot away from the United States and toward Russia. This is another indication of the decline of the American empire. Apparently, new oil pipelines going on in Nord Stream 2, another indicator that Germany will part from U.S. hegemony. Story that came on out from Zero Hedge, stunning footage of America's crumbling infrastructure. And we've seen so many of these articles recently where they're out there showing how our country is literally being allowed to rot away. The crumbling pavements, corroded metal, abandoned buildings. And I was looking at all these pictures of our deteriorated, dilapidated nation. And I flashed back on Obama's, "You didn't build that." Remember when he came on out and said that? The idea being that the American people didn't really do anything all that useful, that it was all the government-provided infrastructure that made economic activity possible. Well, they did a really swell job, didn't they? So, no, we didn't build that. The government built it, and it's falling apart. It's rotting away. Okay, apparently somebody leaked a memo from George Soros' Open Society Foundation, arguing that the Europe refugee crisis should be accepted as the new normal. That's the new normal. Getting robbed, having your daughters raped, properties vandalized. That's the new normal. Just get used to it. That's what he's saying. And then it goes on to say how George Soros views the refugee crisis as new opportunities for his organization to influence immigration policies on a global scale. Now, out in California, one of the George Soros-linked organizations is behind the push to ban detaining illegal immigrants. He's out there with his money and just telling people, we're going to give you funding and you just leave the illegal immigrants alone. I think we ought to take up all these illegal immigrants and dump them on George Soros' home. He's got lots of land. I've looked at it in Google Earth. He's got lots of room. He could take in thousands and thousands of illegal immigrants, and I think we ought to send them up there. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're just getting a breaking story here. Remember that student, Otto Warmbier, was in North Korea, was sentenced to 15 years hard labor for hostile, well, basically he stole a political poster, a little bit of overkill, was released on humanitarian grounds, came back home. Apparently he has passed away in the U.S. hospital, so that's a tragedy. They did not get him back sooner here. Now we're talking about immigration, and the backlash is definitely starting to build. And apparently they had this mayor in Italy, and she was awarded the UN prize for welcoming migrants, and she's been voted out of office, apparently by quite a large margin. And apparently her agenda had been to basically use her town as a gateway to immigrants coming to Europe, and apparently the voters just got sick and tired of it all because there were all kinds of problems. Now then, the corporate media, they're going wacko over there. Brett Steffens, who's a immigration advocate, actually wrote a column in the New York Times saying that what we should do is deport Americans and bring the migrants in because they're going to work harder, they're going to have more babies, they're going to be satisfied with less, and that this is the way to save the United States of America is just get those Americans who expect too much from the country, expect too much from the economy. They want minimum wage. What? Is this the plan? Flood everybody with migrants, drive the people who expect decent standard of living out of the country or worse? This guy's talking about deliberately turning the United States of America into a third world country, which ultimately they're going to have to do in order to drop those borders. And this is in the New York Times. You know, this isn't the Midnight Sun over there at your supermarket checkout counter. Meanwhile, as of today, the Brexit talks have begun between Britain and the European Union. Apparently, they're going to stretch this out. They're talking about March 2019 as the deadline for coming to an agreement, which unfortunately gives the Remain people about a little less than 2 years to try and find a way to reverse this. And we're already hearing from Brussels and all these other countries, really, you ought to just give up this Brexit idea. It's really just kind of nonsense. Now, the History Channel just started their mini-series, if you will. It's America's War on Drugs. It's a 4-part series. And according to the trailer, they openly talk about how the CIA was bringing cocaine into this country, bringing opium into this country. This is amazing that the History Channel has the courage to do this. And we know it has been going on. Remember Dark Alliance, Arkansas, the Clintons. They're up to their necks in all of this. We're going to take a break for station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So go ahead and call on in with your comments and questions. And before the break, we were talking about how the History Channel is running this 4-part series, America's War on Drugs. And the trailers indicate they're actually talking about how the CIA has been bringing these illegal drugs into our country and selling them. And for those who've been following along what's going on all the way back to Iran-Contra, we know that this has been going on, in point of fact. There's a very good book called Compromised, Clinton, Bush, and the CIA by Terry Reid, who was one of the pilots in that smuggling operation. Then there was The Crimes of Mina, which was this article written by Sally Denton and Roger Morris, based on documents they recovered from Barry Seal's car after he was assassinated. And that article was cleared for publication at the Washington Post by the Washington Post's own lawyers. They fact-checked it and said, yes, this is real. The CIA is running drugs, and unfortunately the story was spiked by then managing editor Bob Kaiser, who wouldn't even meet with the reporters. He sent his secretary out to tell them, your story is spiked. And ultimately it was published in Penthouse magazine. And of course the corporate media is out there saying, well, if it's in Penthouse, I mean, you know, you shouldn't pay attention to it. But it was a well-researched story. There have been a lot of books about this stuff. And basically what it is the CIA likes to do things that don't necessarily have congressional permission. And that means they have to come up with the funding for themselves. And what better way for clandestine funding than the drug trade? And they were bringing heroin back into the United States during Vietnam, smuggling it inside the body bags of our dead kids. And because they couldn't go all the way across the Pacific Ocean back then, Hawaii was a stopover. And unfortunately, it corrupted our state government back then, who were all being bribed to look the other way. Some of that corruption lingered into recent times as well. So back in the 1980s, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the story, the CIA was running an operation to manufacture untraceable military weapons, M16s. And the way they did it is they had these various companies that had the ability to do castings and machine work, make these lower receivers without serial numbers. The rest of the parts were bought as spare parts. And they put these rifles together and they were smuggling them down to the Nicaraguan Contras. It was another regime change going on, like we're seeing in the present day. And the way they funded it was they were bringing cocaine back along those same smuggler aircraft into the United States to sell to your children. And all under the watchful eye of then Governor Bill Clinton, who also set up this money laundry involving banks like Madison Guarantee, land flip deals like Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grand, and the payments being paid out through an Arkansas state office, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, ostensibly as business development loans to the companies that were supplying the guns and parts and other materials for the smuggling operation, but the loans were never repaid. That's how it all worked. And this is why the Clintons and their cronies have been so untouchable throughout the years. They've got the goods on the CIA. And the CIA will protect them, not because they like the Clintons, but in order to protect themselves. So the History Channel is out there talking about this, and that's a good thing. The American people need to understand a very simple truth. The biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. And everybody is dirty with that money. And it's a big stain on the soul of our nation. Now then, let's talk a little bit about computers here. As you're probably aware, a lot of people who are trying to quit smoking have switched over to these e-cigs. And many of these e-cigs will recharge themselves off the USB port on your computer, which sounds like it's really, really convenient, but security researchers are starting to discover these e-cigs with chips inside that are inserting malware onto the computer over that USB port. You should never plug anything into the USB port that you do not know exactly what it is or where it came from. There have even been flash drives coming from companies like China that have malware on them. And you really do need to be very careful about that. So, all righty, let's talk about Hanford over in Washington State. As you know, they've had several accidents over there where these tunnels used to store fuel rods, spent fuel rods for reprocessing, have been collapsing. And there's a big concern about leaking radiation. As it turns out, apparently radiation has been leaking out of Hanford for a very long time. And apparently it's leaking into the Columbia River, which is the largest river in the Pacific Northwest region. And they can't stop it. They don't have the money. There's no money to stop it. Hanford goes back to the 1940s as part of the Manhattan Project. Technically, it was decommissioned after the Cold War, leaving behind some 53 million gallons of high-level radioactive waste. It has been proposed as a Superfund site in 1988, but it's still not there. Everybody downstream is being exposed to this stuff. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our network affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Now, interestingly enough, over at the Dakota Access Pipeline, remember that big stink where the Lakota were very concerned? The pipeline had been moved onto their tribal land in violation of treaty to get it away from a nearby town full of white people. And there was a big stink, and they went to court, and the court basically said the pipeline can go through. This was at the state level. And there was a lot of violence, a lot of underhanded skullduggery on the part of the pipeline people and their security companies. But apparently, at federal level, things have just changed. Washington, D.C. District Court Judge James Brosberg has ruled in favor of the tribe, the Lakota tribe, saying that the Army Corps of Engineers building that Dakota Access Pipeline cannot make any decisions about the impacts of the oil spill. See, where it all came on down is they wanted an environmental assessment of what could happen. And by the way, that pipeline is already leaking. It's not even running at full capacity, and it's already leaking. And the Army Corps of Engineers basically came on out and said, we have evaluated it. It's going to be perfectly safe. And the judge is saying the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't have that authority. It should have been referred to the EPA. Now, what remedy they're going to do, I don't know. But at this point, the story is not over, and it's a classic case of politics overriding science, politics overriding the rights of people to have a safe, healthy environment in which to live. Okay, now then, a very alarming story that came out of IntelliHub. As you know, we've been hearing all these stories lately about these mass ocean die-offs, dead fish washing up on the beaches along the West Coast. Coral reefs are dying at an accelerated rate. And, of course, Al Gore is out there saying, see, it's all global warming. See, I tried to warn you in my movie. Well, apparently, the latest research is showing that the massive use of Roundup, glyphosate, on farm fields, and subsequent runoff into the water supply is what's causing these oceans to die off. There are now dead zones emerging wherever farm runoff is pouring into the ocean. And apparently it is a rapidly growing problem. Monsanto is still trying to deny that there's anything wrong with it. This could turn out to be as big a disaster as DDT. Remember the book, The Silent Spring, where they were just spraying DDT on everything and it wound up killing off benign life forms. Now, over in Europe, there is a petition drive going on, and more than 1 million people have signed the petition demanding that the European Union ban glyphosate over the concern that it causes cancer. And the European citizens are not being fooled by the lobbying or advertising. And, of course, over at Monsanto, they're out there saying, oh, pshaw, you cancer, you people are so picky. What's a little cancer? We're making money here. Okay. Now then, France is now going to mandate more childhood vaccines. They have 3 now. They're jumping it to 11. The same trend we saw over here. Vaccines are mandatory. Horrible things will happen if you don't use them. We know down in Australia they're actually talking about literally removing children from homes if they do not have all their vaccinations here. Right now over in Italy, there are major protests against their new law for mandatory vaccines, and apparently a lot of the Italian parents are saying they're going to leave Italy rather than have this stuff pumped into their kids. Now, over the last couple of days, you have probably noticed a renewed ad campaign for the HPV vaccine, about how you should give it to children who are 11 and 12, because not because they're sexually active, but because it'll help prevent certain cancers. And by the way, if you listen to the language very carefully, they're not saying it does. They're saying it could save you, it could protect. It's a big maybe, it's a big question mark. So there's this article that's over at jeffreyjackson.com where it's basically talking about how this whole HPV Gardasil vaccine program is just this coordinated fraud. Sorry about that. And more damaging information is coming on out. As you know, over in Europe, a lot of girls who were given Gardasil came down with narcolepsy. Can't stay awake. They just keep nodding off. And there have been other serious adverse reactions. And it's very alarming to see a medical industry backed up by a government that is so intent on selling more product that they're simply not concerned with whether it even works, or even worse, if it's causing harm, which it seems to be doing. That lust for those stacks of ink and paper has destroyed what used to be the best qualities of being an American. Concern, care for each other. The Hippocratic principle, first of all, do no harm. Amazon, as you know, is buying the Whole Foods chain. They're already announcing major staff layoffs. And we do need to be concerned. People go to Whole Foods because they're trying to avoid GMO, they're trying to avoid chemicals. Amazon, according to this article over in Government Slaves, has been selling ground turmeric root powders. And somebody got some and did an analysis on it and found it contains huge amounts of lead. Now remember, our guest tomorrow is Dr. Renee Default, who's going to be talking about mercury in high fructose corn syrup. How do these toxic heavy metals get into these products? You can't think of how they could get there by accident, but they're there. Down in Tanzania, Monsanto has scored a big victory. GMOs are now enforced by law. Farmers who try and grow traditional seeds can go to jail. And boy, oh boy, that right there is fascism. Al Gore, as you know, is making the rounds. He's got his new movie coming out this summer, an inconvenient sequel. He's trying to build an audience for it. Doesn't look like it's going to do very well. But he's basically back out there saying, give me your money and your freedom or face global warming. And by the way, they're still having to bulldoze the snow out of the mountain roads out in California here. And we're not out of the woods yet on this, because this record snowfall, when it does melt, we're going to see some serious flooding across America's West. So this is not going away anytime soon. All righty, let's see. I actually have run off the end of my talking points here. I was expecting a few more phone calls. So let's go back and recap what's going on over in Syria, because it's a very serious situation out there. Over the weekend, a U.S. Fa-18 Super Hornet shot down a Syrian Sukhoi 22. The official U.S. government position is the Sukhoi was attacking some of the U.S.-backed rebels who are trying to bring down Bashar al-Assad. And the U.S. says they have a right to defend themselves and their allies inside Syria. Actually, no, they don't. The U.S. does not have a right to be there. They've basically invaded the place. They've been trying to get rid of Bashar al-Assad for over 5 years. And they're trying to make it palatable to you, the American public, by saying that this is all about the war on ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It's ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We're going after them. But they keep missing them. And they keep hitting the Syrian government forces that are trying to corral these rebels. There was a big stink over the last 2 weeks about how the U.S. literally attacked pro-Syrian government forces 3 different times, apparently to blow holes in the lines to allow ISIS and Al-Qaeda to escape. So what the U.S. is saying and what they're doing are 2 completely different things. Now, obviously, the shoot-down of this Sukhoi is a very dangerous escalation. You're 1 degree of separation away from an outright conflict between U.S. forces and Russian forces. Now, the Syrian government, the Russian military, and even the Kurds are saying this airplane was actually attacking ISIS when the U.S. shot it down. So Russia has basically ended the cooperation agreement where they were going to stay out of each other's way. Russia's very angry that the United States did not notify Russia ahead of time, which was part of that agreement. So the agreement is now basically over, and Russia is saying that any U.S. aircraft west of the Euphrates can be targeted. Now, they've stopped short of saying they're just going to shoot it down automatically, but obviously any U.S. warplanes or drones that are attacking forces on the ground are going to be a target, and the U.S., at least for the moment, appears to be kind of backing off on that situation. But I think what's going on over in Syria, and you know what's really amazing? Remember earlier in the year where things seemed to be steadying down. The Syrian government was almost in control of Syria. Even the U.S. was saying they were ready to accept Assad's continued presidency, and it was all toning down. Then there was that false flag in Idlib, followed by that harebrained cruise missile attack onto the Syrian air base. Most of those cruise missiles actually missed the target. Those that hit didn't hit anything important. The base was back in operation 24 hours later. And all of a sudden we're back to this same thing about, you know, Assad must go, Syria bad, Syria bad. We're getting into another quagmire over there. We've already been there 5 years. We've been in Afghanistan 15 years. Somebody has to wake up and realize this policy isn't working any longer. And worse, nobody is fooled by the propaganda. Nobody is believing that these countries deserve this kind of treatment. As I mentioned earlier in the show, look at the world's least peaceful nations around the globe, and they all share that common factor. They've had democracy brought to them by the United States of America. I think it's time for all Americans to stand up and say, enough is enough, because we are risking outright war with Russia and with China. And on the day when the U.S. government realizes they cannot prevail with the conventional weapons, they'll resort to the nukes. And that's going to be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. The time to become an anti-war protester is right now. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and the corporate media is going on about the van plowing into the Muslims outside the mosque. And again, earlier in the show, we pointed out how the media is saying lone wolf, yet witnesses on the ground are saying that there were at least 3 men inside the van, so it's beginning to look like this is being done for some political purpose. And I have to laugh because on the Fox News channel, Spectrum Cable TV/internet is advertising their wonderful service, which is anything but, and it continues to be problematic. We are not getting the bandwidth we pay for. And again, Spectrum has actually been sued in some states for false advertising, for promising 300 megabits per second and delivering 30. Somebody just sent me this article. This is over at Natural News, which is a really good resource, by the way. Apparently this group, Moms Across America, has just released a new video called Communities Rising. And it's talking about the toxicity of GMOs and glyphosate. And glyphosate is a toxin. It's declared a probable carcinogen by the World Health Organization. Now, the problem with the GMOs is not the altered DNA, but the proteins formed by the altered DNA, the protein expression, because these are proteins we have not co-evolved with. They're brand new, and you will ingest them, and your cells will try and fit them into the receptor sites where the normal protein would go, and they don't quite fit, which can lead to all kinds of medical consequences. In fact, I'm still curious if that Morgellons disease outbreak a few years ago might have been a GMO accident. First of all, it did happen around areas where test fields were being planted, and researchers apparently found plant DNA inside those fibers that were growing out of people's skin. And again, genetic engineering is the most dangerous technology we've ever played with. We're tinkering with the very code of life itself. You can make a mistake. Who knows what can happen? Who knows what can happen at all? Look at all the mistakes they make with vaccines. Now we're getting an updated story from Syria. Apparently the Syrian soldiers have managed to kick ISIS out of the town of Rasafa in Raqqa. And so now they're celebrating there. And they're making good gains. If it wasn't for the U.S. getting in the way, which the Syrian forces are saying, that's what the U.S. is doing. They get in the way. They create escape routes for ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And you have to wonder what is going to be the next stage of this, because the U.S. government has a problem. They keep telling us it's all about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and yet clearly they are supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda and going after the Syrian government forces and their allies. Are they going to try another false flag chemical attack someplace? Oh, he's using chemical weapons. You know, Assad is tearing tags off the couch cushions. Assad passes wind in the elevators, or whatever else they're going to say about him. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Amazon is acquiring Whole Foods, and the news is not good. They're slashing jobs. They're going to pull back on the cashiers. They're probably going to switch to automated self-checkout. And worse, they are going to change to cheaper products in a price war with Walmart. And so they're going to destroy the brand. I think this is a very, very reckless move where you're going to destroy the brand that made that company. So, and I understand that Amazon has huge amounts of money, and they can afford a mistake or a whoopsie. But again, if they go to cheaper products that turn out to have chemicals and GMO, they will destroy their own brand. And we have a Whole Foods here on Oahu. Unfortunately, it's over at the other end of the island. So we tend to use the local down-to-earth at the bottom of the hill. And there's also a GNC in our mall that we go to every once in a while. We're going to take a break for commercials. Phone lines, again, are open, 800-313-9443. Do call on in and help me finish up this show. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Coming up toward the end of the program here. And a quick reminder, tomorrow our third-hour guest is Renee Dufault. She is going to be talking about mercury found in high fructose corn syrup. On Wednesday, Miriam Azizi, she's an activist regarding family rights in Israel. She's going to be talking to us about some developments over there. Meanwhile, let's go back to the phones here. Jeff in Minnesota, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, hi. You said something about the in reserve, about the Federal Reserve and the Bank of North Dakota. What's that all about?
Well, the Bank of North Dakota is a state bank. It's run by the state of North Dakota, and it's being run for the benefit of the state and the people rather than a for-profit operation. And again, if you go back and you look at the history of the United States when it was first started, the reason we fought the American Revolution was to get away from this private central banking model, in that case the Bank of England, which would simply print up banknotes and then loan them out at interest, so that the bankers made the lion's share of the profit from all economic activity. And the early colonies, of course, had printed their own currency by the government in order to avoid having to pay interest to the Bank of England. So King George III passed the Currency Act, which ordered everybody in the colonies to use these banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England, and that was really a prime cause of the American Revolution. Now, of course, when we got our latest version of the private central bank, the Federal Reserve, our schools were encouraged to stop talking about the Currency Act and reframe the revolution in terms of tea in Boston Harbor and Paul Revere's ride and the rest of it. But private central banking does not serve the community. It doesn't serve the people. It serves itself. It's a for-profit venture. And I would argue that it's actually unconstitutional, because the Constitution gives the government the right to coin all money and regulate its value, and does not authorize the delegation of that authority to a private company. And but we've had it for 100 years, and the result is that we are all hopelessly in debt, which is the end result of any country enslaved to a private central bank, as we're seeing all across Europe right now.
And how do we get out of it? I mean, I see that all the, the money made from drugs goes just to pull all the money off the street that's pumped in from the central bank.
Well, the specific economic activity isn't really so much the issue. We need to go back to the monetary system our nation started with, which was the government creates the money, they coin the money, the paper notes are just claim checks. The money is the metal in the coinage. And the government would then spend that money into circulation to buy what the government needed. It would flow through commerce without accruing any interest, and then the government would tax it back at the end of the cycle in the same amount, no additional interest needed, to balance the books and close the cycle. And that was the economic system that allowed a very young United States of America to become very quickly a world economic power.
I mean, you can just see that people have suitcases full of 20s, but nobody will want them because they've got a case of beans in the basement, and that's all they can think about is something to eat.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the end result of all of this inflation and money creation, first of all, the Federal Reserve is refusing to say how much new money they've created to pour all over Wall Street in the last few years. And ultimately, we're going to wind up like they did in Zimbabwe, where people are walking around with paper notes that say $100 trillion in their pockets, and it'll be completely and utterly worthless.
I had to pay $18 to park for 29 minutes downtown Minneapolis. It said $2 for the first 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and after that, it's $18.
Yeah, I'm afraid, we have the same problem here in Honolulu. The owners of those private parking lots just gouge people. They gouge the tourists. They figure they can get away with it.
And they say that we're going to need 18 to 30,000 more apartment buildings or apartments in the Twin Cities in the next few years. At the same time, every major road and artery is being reduced by one lane on each side for bike lanes. And they're putting up fixed barriers so you can't drive in the bike lanes. So they're trying to get us out of our cars.
Well, that's part of the Agenda 30. They want everybody out of the cars. We're dealing with it here in Hawaii with our light rail project, which has gone hideously over cost. It's very delayed. They're already having to go back and repair large sections of the track. It's not even in use yet. They're going to have to probably replace all the rail cars. They're defective. And now there's a movement here in Hawaii calling for a complete audit of the project to find out where all this money has gone, because it does feel like it's a boondoggle, and they could wind up scrapping the project, which would leave us with these little rails overhead as an eyesore. They're really not pleasant to look at. It's not the view of Hawaii the tourists want to see.
Maybe you could support tents for the homeless on those rails.
You probably could. And but there's another thing that's going on. Believe it or not, even though our state is hovering dangerously close to bankruptcy, Hawaii, it looks like it's going to be the first state to pass a universal basic income. In other words, if you are below a certain level of income, the government is going to make it. It's another name for welfare, but they're calling it universal basic income. And I don't know how they're going to pay for it, because the state is broke, especially since TSA has ruined our tourism industry. The state's in serious trouble.
That's for sure, everywhere. Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Apostle in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How are you, Mike?
Hanging in.
Hope you and Claire are okay. No issues.
Well, yeah, we're fine.
Okay, but you mentioned the other day about one of your friends had glaucoma.
Yes.
Yeah, I can give you a simple remedy for it, whatever, that will help your friend, and he won't have to go through any medical issues whatsoever.
Yes.
One teaspoon of cayenne pepper into a glass of orange juice.
Oh, okay.
Drink it every day. I have a friend of mine, he's 90 years old, and his brother became blind through glaucoma.
Mm-hmm.
He has glaucoma. He's been taking this, and it went away.
Well, I'll have to definitely take a look at that. That sounds really, really interesting.
Right. He even asked his doctor if it was possible to put the cayenne pepper into his eyes, and the doctor said, you know what? Whatever the hell you're doing, keep up with it, because you don't have it. You do not have it. And whatever you're doing, just stay with that, and I don't want to go any further with it.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, the reality is that in the history of medicine, there are a lot of very wonderful, powerful cures that are made out of natural materials. Unfortunately, they can't be patented. And in this get-rich-quick out of people's fear of being ill society, the pharmaceutical companies want to come up with new molecules, new chemicals that can be patented to maximize their profitability, and very often their synthetic medicines are nowhere near as good as the old home remedies that your grandfather and grandmother used to do. I have this wonderful book. I actually had a first edition of this book of herbal remedies from the turn of the 1900s. And I actually donated it to a museum, and then I found somebody had actually reprinted it, so I got into the copy. And there's a lot of really good stuff in there. And when you look at this attitude coming from the medical establishment that, they're just there to sell you treatment after treatment after treatment, I get real skittish about going to doctors. Obviously, I had to go to the doctor when I had my pneumonia a few years back. But other than that, I just want to stay away because of all these horror stories.
Well, most people do, Mike. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But I'm giving you a remedy, whatever, to get rid of your friend's glaucoma. And you know what? He's gonna thank you for giving him to it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I will mention it to him. I will mention it to him. Of course, I think he likes his current treatment regimen, which of course is the Pakalolo.
The thing is with this, he just drinks it, whatever. And you know what? My friend doesn't drink it all the time. He just drinks it when he feels he needs it at the moment. Now, he's been drinking it all his life.
All right.
Again,
well,
he's 90 years old.
Well, thank you very much for the information there, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Jerry in Chicago. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I'm just in regards to what the gentleman called in about that lived in Minneapolis, talking about the parking. You know, the last thing that Tricky Dick Daley did here, who was the mayor for, I don't know how many terms, and his father was part of the machine with the democratic system back in the 60s when the riots were going on.
Yes.
But he privatized all the parking meters around here, and then he went and got to work as a CEO, not an executive CEO, but a CEO of the parking meter company that he sold out to. After he was done being mayor and turned it over to Rahm Emanuel.
Well, I'm not surprised. We saw the same thing going on here in Hawaii. When we first moved here, there was plenty of public parking that was basically set aside by the city, and the parking was very, very reasonable. And over time, under our Democratic leadership, these parking lots have been sold off into private hands, and, of course, the parking has become hideously expensive now.
Well, I hear you on that, and there's something else wrong with Chicago, is that every time, like, they build a school or something like that, it's as if they have no clue of how many people will be showing up in cars every day to work at the school. And the people are forced to park on the streets. Well, all the streets, you have to have a permit to park there. So if there's a Sox game or a Cubs game and they don't recognize the car with the permit in the window, which is about $160, you get towed away. So I just wanted to leave you with that. I think all these big cities are the final trap for grabbing you by the ankles and shaking all the loose change out of your pocket.
Well, I agree with that, and I think it's more than just simple greed. I think the reality is that all of these governments at all levels are hopelessly broke and deep in debt, and right now pillaging and plundering the population is the only option they've got left.
Yeah, well, the population that they're pillaging is the working class right now. And I mean, I thought I heard something 3 years ago that said something to the point where you are taxed to the point of about 67%. So 67 cents of every dollar you earn is basically going into somebody else's hands, not yours.
That's that sounds about right here. Most people, when they get their paycheck and they look at that withholding stub and they say, oh, it's not that bad, what you're forgetting about is your employer has to pay taxes for the government's permission to give you a job. And if you take those employment taxes and add them to what is withheld from your paycheck, you will discover that, yes, in point of fact, government at all levels is making more off of your work than you are. And that ratio of 50% for yourself, 50% for the masters is exactly the same ratio that we had in the antebellum South under slavery, the medieval serfs, or the Roman slaves. Those are the numbers. That's how it works.
Well, okay, I just wanted to voice my opinion for a minute. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the good work you do.
All right.
Have a good day.
Same to you. Thank you very much here. Somebody just wrote on in asking if this van attack in London, where there seems to be some confusion how many people were actually in the car, may be an attempt by Theresa May to show her humanity, because she came out of that Grenfell Tower debacle seriously damaged. And it's entirely possible. This disparity between the official number of people in the van and what the witnesses are saying suggests it was some kind of a covert operation, false flag. Who knows? Okay, the Homes and Community Agency is the UK state regulatory body for social housing, and its job is to monitor the performance, finances, and provision of services of landlords. And apparently they dropped the ball rather badly when it came to the Grenfell Tower here. It's kind of an interesting story here, and it's a reminder to people who, like me, have a classified past. Apparently, this woman was out at the trash that she shared with the neighbor, and the neighbor apparently has moved away and just threw a bunch of classified NASA information in the trash bin. That's not what you're supposed to do with it. And apparently a lot of information that could have led to identity theft here. Story coming out of Investment Watchdog saying it is time for somebody to appoint a special counsel to investigate Hillary Clinton, to investigate the email server, to investigate if Comey committed obstruction of justice, if Loretta Lynch committed obstruction of justice. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. It's time for Trump to go on the offensive. He has played rope-a-dope long enough. He's got to come out swinging. He needs to put on his presidential brass knuckles and just come on out and start fighting back against the swamp things. Because the reality is that they're going to keep this up. The Russia collusion, that didn't work. Obstruction of justice, when that doesn't work, what else will they come up with? They're going to keep going until they find something that can basically shut him down, or at least keep him hamstrung. They're trying to keep him so busy with all of this swampiness that he can't carry out his agenda. And then they'll go into the campaign 2020 saying, well, Trump said he was going to do this and he couldn't do it, and Trump said he was going to do that and he was going to do that. And it's obstructionist. Trump needs to regain the initiative, especially against Hillary Clinton. He campaigned on putting Hillary Clinton in jail. I want that promise kept. So do most Americans. I grieve to see this country where the rich and powerful are able to get away with what they're able to get away with. That's not the way the nation is supposed to be. People who do bad things are supposed to be corrected on that. And yes, I saw a lot of this kind of thing in Hollywood, and I've been watching it in government all this time. We all stood there and cheered Trump saying, lock her up, lock her up. The time has come to do that. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today here. And basically just finishing up a couple of stories here. A little bit of good news for the right to keep and bear arms. Story coming out of PatriotRising.com. Apparently, armed homeowner captures 2 cop-killing fugitives that escaped days before. There was another story we put on up where a homeowner armed with a machete defeated a home invasion gang that had a shotgun. I wouldn't recommend going up against a shotgun with a machete, but again, most criminals, they're not expecting a pushback, and it'll catch them by shock here. Article coming out of Patriot Rising saying that violence abroad leads to violence at home, and it does seem to be, that's happening. It's coming here. All this violence, all this civil unrest that we have spawned in all these countries for regime change, it's coming back to haunt us here. A little bit of good news, getting back to Grenfell Tower. Apparently massive donations have come on in for the care and aid of the survivors. Unfortunately, they're now saying 58 people died in that horrible, horrible fire, but people are stepping up to the plate to help them out here. Apparently, a marketing company working for the Republican National Committee accidentally left sensitive personal details of almost 62% of the U.S. population exposed. This is the largest breach of electoral data in the U.S. to date. 198 million Americans' personal data. I think it's time to pull back from all this computerization until we can deal with the issues of security and privacy. Because it's almost like the politicians just don't care anymore. You know, spying is the new normal. Lack of privacy is the new normal. What are you complaining about here? Apparently, Google is planning to increase censorship on YouTube. filtering out content that glorifies terrorism. And the claim is 23-year-old Salman Abedi was radicalized after watching videos of an American preacher posted on the site. I'm not sure how real that is. You don't watch a video and all of a sudden get turned into a terrorist. It takes a long time and a lot of very ugly incidents to make somebody go through that kind of a change. It just doesn't happen watching a video. It just doesn't here. Apparently Ron Paul is out there stepping back up to this whole central bank thing. He's been quoted as saying, when I say cut taxes, I don't mean fiddle with the code. I mean abolish the income tax and the IRS and replace them with nothing, which I'm sure probably most of us would be very happy to see, because we're already taxed way, way, way too much. And it's time to try and go the other way. The more they tax us, the slower the economy gets. Let's go the other way. Remember the Reagan tax cut? They cut a bunch of taxes. The economy lit up. The GDP went up, and tax revenues actually increased at lower tax rates. But politicians are greedy. All right, we're going to head on out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Have a good day, and aloha, America.